colostomy bags, excluding removal of the phalange or manipulation of the stoma site. So again, your unlicensed staff, as part of toileting, can change and empty colostomy bags. They can place them. They cannot get into anything that's going to require more clinical specifications. So no manipulating the site. They can measure blood pressure, heart rate, temperature, and respiratory care.
Excuse me.
Yes?
So you're going to have my unlicensed staff use a stethoscope and a little blood pressure cuff thingy to be able to take a blood pressure?
I'm not going to. They're your staff. They are allowed to under statute and rule.
So are they now allowing automatic blood pressure cuffs? Wrist or arm cuffs?
They are allowed, there's nothing in statute or rule that describes the manufacturer of the cuff.
Okay.
There is not anything that prohibits the use of automatic blood pressure cuffs. Are you the administrator? Assistant administrator? If your facility chooses not to have your unlicensed staff evaluate and complete vitals, don't do it. If you don't want them doing insulin, don't do it. We are not coming to you and citing for you for having nurses in your building. How dare you? No, if you don't want to do that, do not do that. Wait till I get to the training portion. That may not change your mind. Also changed in rule, just some cleanup language, since the medication administration is no longer defined to include glucose testing, because we're now allowing that as part of assisting with self-administration. And it also clarifies language, it strengthens the language a bit about documenting the unusual reactions to medications. And my nurses know, you keep your nursing notes, right? So if there's something with an unusual reaction to a medication you administer, you would document that. Also clarifies and cleans up the language requiring, even with medication administration, for medication records, that the medication record needs to be updated each time the medication is offered or administered. And if the resident refuses the medication, what do?
Document.
Document it. If it's becoming an ongoing issue and the resident's continuing to refuse the medication, would you tell somebody? Absolutely. Medication labeling and orders. We entered this decade, and the language now clarifies that any changes in direction for use for medication the facility is administering or assisting with, the orders can be written, faxed, or electronic. Because how many of you have electronic records in your facility? So yes, the rule now states that you can get the medication orders electronically. New directions for medications need to be recorded, and the facility can place the alert on the label or get an updated label from the pharmacy. Okay, here's another biggie. Over-the-counter products. Your facility may now keep a stock supply of over-the-counter products for multiple resident use. When providing the product to a resident, the name and amount provided must be recorded in the morgue. All must be stored in a locked container or a secured room in a central location, so you need to store them securely, just like your ordered medications. All over-the-counter products have to be labeled with the medication name, the date, the notice that it is part of the facility's stock supply. If they're prescribed by a healthcare provider for one of your specific residents, exclude outside of the stock supply. This has not changed. It has to be labeled with the resident's name and the manufacturer's label for use, for the directions for use. If a resident self-administers medication, a healthcare provider's order for over-the-counter products is not required, and it's not required when the unlicensed staff are assisting. Always one of the funniest things, nurses, what do you need to give anything? You gotta have an order. Your unlicensed staff do not have to have an order. A healthcare provider's order is required when a nurse provides assistance. So, we're talking about over-the-counter products. Are your unlicensed staff allowed to make judgment about whether or not the resident needs a Tylenol?
No.
Okay. So this is one of those where we're taking it back and getting a little bit of clarification. We will be sending this out, but basically the intent of this, similar to like a PRN medication, if a resident says, I have a headache, I'm not feeling great, can I get 2 Tylenol? Resident takes it from the over-the-counter supply and still is, or the unlicensed staff takes it and still documents it on the MOR. Again, we're getting some clarification on this with some parameters for this because there's still some questions on this that we're sorting out. Go ahead.
Because my worry is when my residents will say, I want 8 Tylenol. You know what I mean? If they want something that's outside the recommended dosage or.
Right, right. Your unlicensed staff would still need to follow the directions for use, which would include the dosage. And remember, they can't assess, they can't go outside of that. But again, we're getting some clarification on that.